Welcome to the deep dive. What if the very thing they spray on your morning cereal to supposedly make you healthier is exactly what's causing your child's sudden behavioral meltdowns?
Or even your own, unexplainable anxiety.
Right. Exactly. Today, we are cracking open a really fascinating transcript from the Ultimate Human podcast, and we're looking at this microscopic genetic glitch that is, frankly, just hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, it's called the MTHFR gene mutation.
And our mission today is to figure out if this one hidden quirk is secretly the driving force behind a whole host of bizarre issues. I mean, we're talking about rogue anxiety attacks, chronic gut pain, or even, like we said, the daily chaos of just getting a kid ready for school.
And to really grasp the sheer scale of what we are talking about here, we have to look at the numbers in the source material. Estimates actually suggest up to 44% of the population might carry this gene mutation.
Wait, 44%?
Yeah, up to 44%. So we are not talking about some rare, isolated medical anomaly here. We are talking about nearly half the people walking down the street, half the people sitting in your office or, living in your own house.
That is just a staggering statistic. Okay, let's unpack this. Because methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase,
Quite a mouthful, yeah.
which is what MTHFR stands for, it sounds like absolute medical alphabet soup.
Uh-huh.
But understanding the mechanism behind it could literally be the ultimate biological shortcut to finally feeling better.
It really could. At its core, the material we're analyzing paints a picture of a dramatic, almost invisible clash between human genetics and our modern industrialized food supply.
So before we get into the wild symptoms, let's just break down the actual machinery here. What is this gene supposed to be doing in the body?
Well, its fundamental role is a conversion process. The MTHFR gene is responsible for taking a compound called folic acid
Right.
and converting it into a usable active form that your body can actually absorb and utilize. And that active form is called methylfolate, or 5-MTHF. That active methylfolate is it's a foundational nutrient. It drives what biologists call the methylation cycle.
Which is like the main engine, right?
Exactly. Think of the methylation cycle as the master biochemical gear shifting in your body. It regulates your neurotransmitters, it powers your digestion, and it dictates how your cells repair themselves on a daily basis.
But reading through these notes, there was a detail that genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
Because I always assumed folic acid was just a natural, healthy vitamin.
Sure, most people do.
Yeah, you hear the word and you picture leafy green vegetables or health food stores. But that's actually folate, right?
Yeah.
Folic acid, the specific compound this gene is trying to convert, is completely synthetic.
Yeah, that's the kicker.
It does not exist anywhere in the natural world. It was engineered in a laboratory.
And what's fascinating here is the ultimate paradox we are dealing with right now, because decades ago, massive public health initiatives were rolled out to fortify our food supply to prevent certain birth defects.
It sounds great on paper.
Right. It was a well-intentioned, broad-stroke approach. But the result is that this synthetic chemical, folic acid, is now sprayed onto almost the entire U.S. grain supply.
It's everywhere.
We are talking about white flour, white rice, commercial bread, pasta, and, the vast majority of breakfast cereals.
And it's brilliant marketing, honestly.
Yeah.
You never look at a box of cereal and see an ingredient label that says sprayed with synthetic laboratory chemicals.
No, of course not.
Instead, we see these incredibly wholesome-sounding words like fortified or enriched. But let's try to visualize what is actually happening inside the body of someone with this mutation when they eat those enriched foods.
Okay, let's do it.
I was thinking, let's imagine your body's metabolic system is like a busy currency exchange booth at an international airport.
Oh, I like this. Okay.
Right. So your body operates strictly on local currency, which in this case is methylfolate. That's the only cash your cells accept to keep the lights on. Now, a massive shipment of foreign currency arrives.
The synthetic folic acid from the breakfast cereal.
Exactly. Now, for someone without the mutation, the exchange booth is fully staffed. They rapidly convert that foreign currency into local cash, and the body's economy just hums along perfectly.
They process it right away.
Right. But for the 44% of people with the MTHFR mutation, the exchange booth is severely understaffed. The tellers are just asleep at the wheel. Or it's like putting heavy diesel fuel into a sports car engine that only runs on premium unleaded.
The engine just can't burn the fuel.
Right. So it floods the system. People with the mutation end up with this massive overabundance of synthetic folic acid they can't metabolize.
And a critical deficiency in the methylfolate they desperately need. You have this massive influx of foreign currency piling up in the lobby. The body cannot convert the synthetic folic acid, so it literally floods the system, causing a biochemical traffic jam.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the cells themselves are bankrupt. They are starving for the active methylfolate they desperately need to run the master controls.
So you're flooded with useless foreign cash and totally broke at the exact same time. And because your systems are essentially bankrupt, they begin to misfire in really loud physical ways. When this system crashes, the fallout hits two areas of the body incredibly hard, which are your nervous system and your gut.
Both rely heavily on that methylation cycle.
Right. So let's look at the nervous system first, because the way this transcript describes MTHFR anxiety completely shifted my perspective. I always thought anxiety needed a trigger.
Like a psychological catalyst, essentially.
Yeah, like a fear of heights or claustrophobia on an elevator or maybe a stressful deadline at work. But reading this, I was shocked to see that this specific type of anxiety is completely blind.
It doesn't need a catalyst at all.
No, it's a lifelong on and off battle that just hits you out of nowhere. You could be driving home from work on an innocuous Tuesday, the sun is shining, traffic is light, your boss wasn't even mean to you that day, and suddenly, bam, you are overwhelmed by a rogue wave of panic.
And to understand why that happens, we have to look at the mechanism. Methylfolate, the local currency we talked about, is the vital raw material your brain uses to synthesize neurotransmitters.
Specifically serotonin and dopamine.
Right.
Yes.
Those are your brain's stabilizing chemicals. When the synthetic folic acid clogs the receptors and the exchange booth shuts down, your brain suddenly drops into a severe chemical deficit.
Wow.
It's not that you are psychologically stressed, it's that the physical factory has run out of supplies. Your nervous system essentially hits the panic button because it lacks the chemical infrastructure to remain calm.
Which perfectly explains the next frustrating symptom mentioned in the source. Traditional anti-anxiety medications usually fail for these people.
They do, yeah.
In fact, people with this mutation often report that those medications just leave them feeling like a zombie. And if you think about how an SSRI works, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it's designed to keep serotonin floating in the brain longer.
Right, but if your factory isn't manufacturing any serotonin to begin with because you lack methylfolate, the medication has nothing to work with.
It just numbs an already depleted system.
It's attempting to manage the inventory of an empty warehouse. And that same lack of chemical power that starves the brain also cuts the power to the digestive system.
Which brings us to the gut.
Right, because the mechanism of digestion requires an immense amount of cellular energy, and without that active folate, the system physically slows down.
The transcript actually uses this incredible visual for the gut. It asks us to think of the human intestinal tract not as a static bag, but as a 30-foot-long conveyor belt.
I thought that was a great analogy.
Yeah. You drop a meal onto one end, right as it exits the highly acidic environment of the stomach, and it has to traverse that entire 30 feet to eventually end up in a basic environment before leaving the body.
And the sequence of events relies entirely on pace. The actual speed of that conveyor belt is arguably more important than the physical contents sitting on it.
Really. The speed is more important.
Yeah, because when you are dealing with an MTHFR mutation and you are deficient in methylfolate, the power to the conveyor belt drops. The technical term is impaired gut motility. The belt loses momentum.
And when biological matter sits in a 98-degree environment for too long without moving, it putrefies.
It's not pretty.
No. The natural bacteria in the gut start feeding on the stagnant food, producing an abnormal amount of gas, severe cramping, and bloating. But I have to play the skeptic for a second here.
Okay, go for it.
Because I know you, listening right now, might be thinking the exact same thing I was. If I eat a huge piece of cheese and an hour later I blow up like a balloon, isn't that just a standard food allergy?
Right, like lactose intolerance.
Yeah. How is a stalled conveyor belt any different from just having a food allergy?
It comes down to consistency. True biological allergies are not transient. If your immune system identifies a protein in milk as an invader on a Monday, it will mount that exact same aggressive immune response on Wednesday and again on Friday.
Oh, so it's a highly predictable, repeatable reaction.
Precisely. MTHFR symptoms, however, are wildly inconsistent, which is what makes them so maddening to diagnose. You might eat a specific meal on a Monday when your body happens to have enough metabolic energy, the belt is moving, and you digest it perfectly.
You're fine.
Right. Then you eat the exact same meal on Wednesday, but your gut motility has completely stalled. The food sits, it ferments, and you experience severe, painful bloating. The material vividly describes this as blowing up like a tick.
which is just such an uncomfortable image. But there is one major red flag mentioned here that really isolates this from a food allergy. It's the fasting bloat. Waking up bloated.
Yes, that's a key indicator.
Because you go to bed, you sleep all night, you haven't taken a single bite of food for 8 or 9 hours, and you wake up feeling completely distended. If it were a food allergy, that makes zero sense. The food is long gone.
Exactly.
But if your 30-foot conveyor belt simply ran out of power and stopped moving overnight, leaving whatever was in there to ferment for 8 hours, it makes perfect biological sense.
And a stalled digestive system creates a massive ripple effect throughout the body. Because this methylation cycle happens very early in the body's overall metabolic process, a failure here stops supplying the raw materials to nearly every other system downstream.
Including your ability to simply rest and recover. Which leads to this incredibly specific and frankly exhausting sleep quirk they talk about. The body tired, mind awake phenomenon.
This is a tough one.
You lay down at night and physically you are completely done. Your muscles are exhausted. But the moment the room gets dark and quiet, your mind suddenly wakes up and sprints a marathon.
Just racing.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily stressful thoughts keeping you awake. You're lying there, staring at the ceiling, wondering about some random conversation from 3 weeks ago, or trying to remember the name of an actor from a 90s movie.
And the reason for that is your brain cannot chemically gear down. The excitatory neurotransmitters are firing without the necessary inhibitory chemicals to balance them out, all because the master control, the methylation cycle, is starved of methylfolate.
Wow. So here's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually fix this? If your body is rejecting this synthetic folic acid, your brain is starved for neurotransmitters and your digestive conveyor belt has ground to a halt. What is the solution?
Well, the answer provided in the transcript is actually stunningly simple. It's targeted supplementation.
Right, they mention a specific stack.
Yes. Specifically, a high-quality B complex, a B12 vitamin, and pure methylfolate. You essentially bypass the broken exchange booth and just hand the body the exact pre-converted local currency it needs.
So once the cells have the active fuel, they can restart the conveyor belt and finally quiet that racing mind.
Exactly. And it really highlights a broader philosophy that runs throughout the source material, which is that your health is entirely dependent on bodily absorption.
It's all that absorption.
It doesn't matter how much you eat or how many vitamins you swallow, if your body cannot mechanically absorb and utilize those inputs.
And that explains why they spend time exploring some pretty advanced biohacking tools too. They aren't just throwing products at the wall, they are looking for ways to bypass these biological bottlenecks entirely.
Right.
For example, they dive heavily into high part per million hydrogen water generators, specifically mentioning a device called the Echo H2O.
And the underlying mechanism there is fascinating. The clinical studies reference suggests that hydrogen-rich water acts as a massive friction reducer for the gut.
Like greasing the wheels of the conveyor belt.
Exactly. It actively reduces inflammation along the intestinal wall, balances stomach acid, and feeds the microbiome. So if you are taking that methylfolate supplement to fix your MTHFR deficiency, drinking hydrogen water ensures the mucosal lining of your gut is primed to actually absorb it.
Rather than just passing it through a stalled conveyor belt, it compounds the efficiency. And they apply that exact same logic to protein, too.
They do.
Because if your gut motility is compromised, digesting a heavy steak or a dense whey protein shake requires a massive amount of metabolic energy that you might not have. So the transcript highlights things like full-spectrum amino acids, and they specifically reference a product called Perfect Amino.
Right, because standard proteins can have an absorption rate as low as 18 to 20%. The rest is just waste sitting on the belt.
But these specific amino acids are engineered to be 99% absorbable.
So they require almost zero digestive effort. They bypass the conveyor belt entirely and go straight into the bloodstream to rebuild tissue. It all connects back to the core theme. If your body rejects the input, like it rejects synthetic folic acid, the system crashes.
Right.
But if you optimize the input for pure absorption, the system thrives.
It makes so much sense for adults trying to manage anxiety or bloating. But, as I kept reading, I realized that stakes are infinitely higher when we look at children.
Oh, absolutely.
Because their rapidly developing brains and tiny metabolisms are being subjected to this exact same dietary environment every single day.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the material paints a stark, almost heartbreaking reality of what happens when a child with a severe mutation is fed the standard American diet.
They call the typical school morning a full contact sport. And so many parents will recognize this scene. The child wakes up seemingly fine, they sit down and eat a standard breakfast, and within 20 minutes, their entire personality shifts,
They become highly irritable.
bouncing off the walls, escalating to what the source calls DEFCON 9. Just getting their shoes on and getting them into the car is a screaming match. And then, a few hours later, the phone rings. It's the teacher. Your child can't pay attention. They are being disrupted. They have zero impulse control.
And the immediate conventional reaction to that phone call is usually a push for a behavioral evaluation, an ADHD diagnosis, or medications like Ritalin.
Which is so common.
But let's look at the biochemistry of that morning routine. What did that child actually eat for breakfast?
The standard American breakfast is essentially a massive delivery system for synthetic folic acid. Pop-Tarts, white bagels, toast, almost every commercial cereal in the aisle. It is a massive, concentrated dose of fortified grain.
Now imagine a child who has a homozygous MTHFR mutation.
Meaning they inherited it from both parents.
Inherited the broken gene from both their mother and their father, yes. Their internal currency exchange booth isn't just understaffed, the doors are completely locked shut.
Oh, wow.
When you feed that child a bowl of enriched cereal, you are unleashing a flood of unmetabolizable synthetic chemicals into a developing brain that has zero capacity to process them. That dietary overload triggers an immediate, profound behavioral disorder.
So it's a biochemical crisis, not a behavioral choice.
Precisely.
But rather than jumping straight to heavy pharmaceuticals, this transcript offers an incredibly empowering, a completely risk-free experiment for parents. It's a 36-hour challenge, just 3 days. For 36 hours, you ruthlessly eliminate all fortified and enriched foods from the child's diet. You take away the commercial bread, the Pop-Tarts, the standard pasta.
And you replace that massive influx of synthetic chemicals with whole, unfortified foods. Whole-fat Greek yogurt, eggs, avocados, or organic cereals that explicitly state they are not enriched.
You make that one dietary shift, and you give them a simple methylated vitamin supplement to provide the active fuel their brain is starving for. The claim here is that within just 3 days, you will see a demonstrative, dramatic shift in that child's behavior.
The chemical storm passes.
Exactly.
Wow.
The brain gets the nutrients it needs to produce stabilizing neurotransmitters, and the daily chaos simply evaporates.
It is a profound testament to how intimately our daily environment interacts with our invisible genetic code. We often view genetics as a rigid blueprint, but it is actually a dynamic conversation with everything we consume.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We started by looking at a laboratory creation, folic acid, sprayed over our entire grain supply in a massive, well-meaning public health initiative.
Right.
We unpacked how, for nearly half the population, a hidden genetic quirk turns that so-called enrichment into a devastating metabolic traffic jam. We traced the biochemical breadcrumbs from a flooded, starved system to the bizarre, silent symptoms, the blinding waves of anxiety on a quiet drive, the 30-foot intestinal conveyor belt that grinds to a halt, leaving you bloated after a 9-hour fast, the exhausted body trapped beneath a racing, chemical-depleted mind, and the daily agonizing struggle of a child's brain drowning in a bowl of breakfast cereal.
It provides an entirely new framework for understanding our own bodies. It shifts the narrative from what is wrong with me to what is my biology trying to process.
Exactly. If you have spent years feeling inexplicably anxious, if you've been bouncing from doctor to doctor trying to solve transient, confusing gut issues, or if you've been battling a child's sudden behavioral meltdowns, you might just need to look through this new lens.
It changes everything.
It really does. It might not be a deep-seated psychological failing. It might not be a mysterious, elusive food allergy. It might simply be a profound mismatch between your unique, invisible genetic blueprint and the fortified flour in your pantry.
Which leaves us with a truly paradigm-shifting thought to carry forward. For decades, massive public health mandates, like the decision to spray synthetic folic acid on the grain supply, were built on the assumption that an average human biology exists.
Right, a one-size-fits-all approach to public health.
But with the explosion of personalized, at-home DNA testing, millions of people are suddenly discovering their unique genetic quirks, like MTHFR. If simply removing a laboratory-made vitamin can reverse a child's behavioral diagnosis in some 6 hours, it begs a massive question.
Okay, what's the question?
Are we currently witnessing the end of mass medicine? As we gain the power to read our own individual blueprints, how long until we entirely dismantle the idea of a standard human diet and take the power of enrichment out of the hands of the industrialized food supply and put it directly back into our own?
Man, the era of the average human might finally be over. Something to chew on the next time you look at a label that promises you it's enriched. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.